Range Rovers today are expensive headaches. You know that. These opulent SUVs, status symbols for the elite, are often more trouble than they're worth, perpetually in the shop, bleeding bank accounts dry with every sensor malfunction and suspension issue. In 1967, engineer Charles Spencer King is in a British workshop, bent over a drawing board. He's the man in charge of Land Rover development. His mission was pragmatic: bridge rugged utility and everyday comfort. He's sketching a boxy, no-frills vehicle, something with four-wheel drive, but for people who actually wore shoes to work, perhaps even a suit. Not another muddy farm tractor, but a capable, refined vehicle for farmers, professionals, and anyone needing a robust, dependable workhorse. He just wants to build a comfortable farm truck, a reliable tool that could handle the dirt and the highway. Nobody thought much of that simple drawing. Nobody saw it becoming a billion-dollar global luxury brand, adorned with handcrafted leather and cutting-edge electronics, a lavish status symbol whose owners spend thousands of dollars a year just to keep running. They certainly didn't foresee the endless parade of cryptic warning lights, the inevitable trips to specialist garages, the eye-watering repair bills, or Charles Spencer King's story begins in 1925 in Lytham St Anne's, a small coastal town in England. His father Arthur was a quiet man, but brilliant. He designed engines for Rolls-Royce, the kind that pushed planes through the sky. Young Charles watched him work, sketching parts, making things move. Cars back then, they were either built for mud or built for money, but never both. You had the rough Land Rovers, working hard on the farm, and then the fancy sedans stuck to the pavement. King, growing up, couldn't shake the feeling. Why settle for one or the other? He'd often think, someone should just make a car that does everything. By the early 1960s, King was deep in the automotive world. He'd honed his craft working on brutal racing machines for BRM. He knew how to make things go fast, how to make them tough. But then he landed at Rover, a company known for its workhorse Land Rovers. These trucks were legendary, but let's be honest, they were a pain to drive on a paved road. King saw a gap, a craving for something more. People had money now. They wanted to take their families somewhere nice, but still tackle that muddy track to the country house. He found a kindred spirit in Gordon Bashford, another engineer. In 1966, the two of them started sketching quietly in a corner of Rover's Solihull plant. Not new Land Rover, something entirely different. A car that could do both. The problem with a big idea is getting anyone else to buy into it. Back in 1966, Rover management was busy with their usual lines. A luxury off-roader? It sounded like a fantasy. Too expensive. Too strange for the market they knew. So King and Bashford had to work in the shadows. No big budget, no dedicated team. They scrounged parts, borrowed workshop space after hours. They even gave it a code name, Velar, from the Latin for to veil or to cover. It felt like they were building a whole new type of car in secret, tucked away from the official view. It was a grind, and frankly, it often felt like no one believed it was possible. But King knew this wasn't just a pet project. This was the future. He pushed on. By 1968, the Velar prototypes were hitting the road, and King's vision was taking shape. He was obsessed with the ride. How do you make a truck feel like a smooth sedan? His answer was radical. Long travel coil spring suspension on all four wheels. Other off-roaders use stiff leaf springs. Great for hauling, terrible for comfort. King chose big, soft coils. Then he added permanent four-wheel drive. That's what made it handle, what made it stick. You could take one of these Velar prototypes, thrash it across a muddy field, then drive it straight to town without spilling your coffee. It wasn't just tough, it was smooth. It was everything King had imagined. The wider world was about to see it. In 1970, the two-door Range Rover was finally unveiled. It was a sensation, global acclaim. Everyone, from farmers to royalty, loved it. It set a whole new standard. But here's where the trouble started. When something is this good, everyone wants more. By 1981, people were asking for back doors. They wanted more comfort, more luxury, more everything. Rover listened. They introduced the four-door model. On the surface, this was a win. More sales, broader appeal, but King had designed a practical tool, a machine, not a fashion statement. He saw the shift happening, the relentless push for more amenities, more prestige, more complexity, started pulling the car away from its original purpose. It was a slow process, a creeping change. And you couldn't help but wonder, was this still the go anywhere, do anything vehicle king had envisioned? Or was it becoming something else entirely? The 1990s brought a full embrace of this new direction. Range Rover doubled down on the luxury. They packed in advanced electronics. Air suspension systems designed for comfort became standard. Models like the P38A were loaded with features. The goal was to make it even more opulent, even more prestigious. But every new gadget, every complex wire, every computer chip added another point of failure. The engineers knew it. They warned about the coming headaches, the nightmare of maintenance down the line. Some critics scoffed, saying the car was losing its soul. But the public ate it up. The flash, the status, the comfort, it all sold. And the sales numbers just kept climbing. Flash forward to today. The Range Rover is an undeniable icon, a global symbol of luxury and capability. But that success came with a heavy price. Those complex electronics, that sophisticated air suspension, they started failing. Not sometimes, but often. Owners found themselves with infuriating electrical glitches, dashboards lit up like Christmas trees, and repair bills that could buy a whole other car. The Range Rover became notorious. Charles Spencer King, the man who dreamed it up, watched its transformation. He once said, plain as day, the biggest mistake was when they tried to make it more luxurious. What started as a simple, versatile tool, designed to do everything, slowly became a beautiful, frustrating money pit. And you're the one stuck paying for it. Okay, so we've seen it. This vehicle, this whole idea of the Range Rover, it changed how we think about a tough off-road machine. It promised you power, sure, but it also promised you a certain kind of life, a life where you're comfortable, where you've arrived. That was the dream. But that promise came with a price tag, one that kept growing long after you drove it off the lot. It was never just the sticker price, was it? For decades, people saw that badge and they thought success. They still do sometimes. But the folks who actually owned them, they learned the hard way. They lived it. They learned about the hidden costs that piled up, the workshops that became a second home, the baffling electronics failures that could take weeks or months to diagnose and fix, the parts that were impossible to find or cost an arm and a leg when you did find them. That was your money, your time, just bleeding out of your wallet month after month, year after year, just to keep the thing on the road. It wasn't convenience, it was a burden. You bought it for the look, maybe, for the status, to feel like you were part of something. But what you often got was a headache, a financial drain, a constant reminder that something built for show often isn't built to last or to serve you. You were serving it. The legacy? It's not just about a fancy SUV anymore. It's about what happens when image trumps engineering. When the profit margins on service contracts become more important than actually building a reliable vehicle. It's a pattern we see everywhere. Once you start looking close at who's really making the money. This whole Range Rover story, it's a lesson for all of us. You push for more luxury, more fancy bells and whistles. You chase that top-tier sophistication, but you chip away at what actually matters. That core reliability. The thing that makes a machine, any machine, truly great. If this breakdown of the real cost of luxury hit home for you,